Honourable Te Urara Whaiho.
Tēnā koe, Mr Speaker. Kia ora tātou katoa e te whare. I stand to follow on other speakers with respect to the opportunity given by the Prime Minister to make a statement today. Today's announcement about the possibility of New Zealand entering into a war against the Islamic State in Syria and Iraq is set against, in some senses, some uncanny circumstances. Today, Māoridom at least, and those of Taranaki, think about the cost and the casualties of Parihaka, and also, of course, tonight, an acknowledgement of the works of Mr Guy Fawkes, a ritual that has no cultural relevance to Aotearoa. Mr Speaker, 133 years ago, early in the morning of the 5th of November 1881, a small New Zealand settlement was the scene of one of the worst infringements of civil and human rights ever committed and witnessed in this country. A rural community was invaded by 150 militia and armed members of this constabulary. As innocent children welcomed the army within the midst, over 2,000 locals watched on in silence. Mr Speaker, this was not an invasion by foreign troops on our own soil. Amongst the military forces in attack were politicians driven by their hunger for rich, fertile lands of prime land of Taranaki. The forces were led, in fact, by two members of Parliament, both cabinet ministers. With respect to Mr Guy Fawkes, Mr Speaker, it's my suggestion that today, while there might be sparklers and rockets throughout the country tonight, most New Zealanders will not be aware about the history that comes from that event, namely a plot to blow up Westminster Palace and to take the life of the then monarch, King James I. Mr Speaker, I pay particular reference to Parihaka on this historical day because it provides a glimpse into war in our own nation. It gives some sense of harm caused to generations of families through the military action. The people of Parihaka, commonly referred to that as Te Pāhuatanga o Parihaka, the invasion of Parihaka, it is still, even today, spoken about. The Māori Party, sir, is strongly opposed to New Zealand taking up military involvement in Iraq in a civil war not of our making. Mr Speaker, during the 2003 to 2013 deployment in Afghanistan, Aotearoa, we lost 10 New Zealand soldiers. As a nation, we suffered the loss of lives through military presence in Afghanistan at a great and enduring cost to the well-being of families and communities living here. There is another reason why I wanted to refer to Parihaka, Mr Speaker. Parihaka was also the birthplace, of course, of the unique movement of passive resistance associated with the visionary leadership of Te Whiti o Rongomai and Tohu Kākahi. Both men were committed to non-violent action, drawing on ancestral wisdom to offer both spiritual and political leadership while war broke out all around them. Mr Speaker, there are other options that we could explore. We welcome the emphasis that the Prime Minister gave in his statement today towards humanitarian aid. The expression of manaakitanga in a global context is demonstrated by the commitment to increase support for refugees from Syria and Iraq who have fled their homes in terror as the result of the ongoing violence. This is a responsibility for peacemaking at an international level, which we absolutely support. It is a responsibility which is consistent to other members that have held my office, such as Sir Apirana Ngata, who soon after war was announced in 1939, put into words the sacrifice our whānau were prepared to make. He said, "We are participants in a great commonwealth, to the defence of which we cannot hesitate to contribute our blood and our lives. We are of one house, and if our Pākehā brothers fall, we fall with them. How can we ever hold up our heads when the struggle is over?" to the question, "Where were you when New Zealand was at war?" End of quote. Mr Speaker, our participation in serving the nation in such a way came as a result of our commitment to honouring the obligations and duties which we believe came out of the covenant we signed in the Treaty of Waitangi, Te Treaty of Waitangi. We commend that generosity of spirit, that incredible sacrifice of life and limb that has caused enduring harm to the spirit of the generations that follow. Mr Speaker, I want to take us back to the last decade of deployment to Afghanistan. Those 10 fallen soldiers killed in attacks in the Bamyan province or Kabul were aged between 21 and 41. 7 were in their 20s. Young New Zealanders starting off in life, their lives brutally cut short. We cannot forget their sacrifice, and indeed the sacrifices of the Second World War, the Korean War, the Malayan emergency, and so on. Mr. Speaker, the New Zealand Army, Ngāti Tūmataonga, has served with distinction in the major conflicts in the 20th century. They have given so much to fight for the honour of our country overseas. But when do we get around to having the national discussion around military contribution? While the statement today thankfully rules out sending SAS or any other troops into the combat roles in Iraq, it does state that the military can and may well help with building capacity and capability of Iraqi forces. Mr. Speaker, it also indicates a willingness to help train the Iraqi forces to deploy military planners to the Middle East to determine whether New Zealand can play a role in helping Iraqi defence forces. We understand the importance of diplomatic and intelligence measures in order to engage, but the Māori Party asks what makes the training work any different to being in the front line firing the guns. Mr. Speaker, while there is a clear statement that there will be no combat role in Iraq, we are not convinced that helping to train the Iraqi forces is sufficiently removed from the combat zones. Mr. Speaker, throughout the wars of the 1860s, the Parihaka leaders forbade the use of arms and condemned violence and greed, and in doing so they modelled the art of passive resistance as a template for healing a nation, for responding to conflict through peacemaking and dialogue. So we have a proud history of protecting communities through different means, through peace building. This is an opportunity, we say, surely, to ensure that our distinctive legacy of peaceful action might be useful. Mr. Speaker, there's one other area that I want to touch on, and that is the increased authority and intervention by the New Zealand Security Intelligence Service to carry out video surveillance on private properties for the purposes of observing activities. Mr. Speaker, the Māori Party will stand on record as stating our absolute opposition to any such actions that would see a repeat of Operation 8, in which the innocent lives of the whole communities of Ruatoki were trampled on, traumatised and forever changed as a result of the heavy hand of the state. We stand alongside the Tūhoe Nation, who in the last few months only have just received the formal acknowledgement by the Crown, or at least by the police as well, of those injuries occurred on the 15th of October 2007. Mr. Speaker, this incident was disproportionate surveillance under the guise of national security. What the Independent Police Conduct Authority has concluded is that the police failed to meet expected standards when carrying out the Ruatoki and Taneatua roadblocks and 5 of the 41 property searches. Tūhoe, Ruatoki, Taneatua, let us not forget, we have raised these concerns at the highest levels, and we expect this action to never occur again. Mr. Speaker, we do not support the need for citizens in their areas. We do support the need for citizens in their areas, the ability to look after themselves, to be self-determining, to be able to care for themselves against the atrocities of war. But we will never ever support any contribution of a military nature which seeks to strengthen the potency of Iraqi forces to fight others. Mr. Speaker, our focus will always be on being a good international citizen, promoting models of peace and supporting the well-being of families to care for themselves. But we can do that in a peacemaking and humanitarian mode, not in the context of civil war. We have a great international reputation providing humanitarian support. Let us stay where we are strong. Nō reira, kia ora tātou katoa.